Big thank you to today's sponsor, Proton VPN. Many of us feel like privacy is basically impossible these days, so you destroy your computer parts, you throw away all your stuff, you'll throw your computer case away, and you'll go live with the Amish. Since honestly, that feels like the only way to escape the big tech overlords from seeing everything you're doing and constantly collecting data. Best part is, it's not even big tech, it's your literal internet service provider, providing warrantless surveillance access to the National Intelligence Agency. Just because you live in a certain part of the world, you can't watch one of your favorite shows. If you want to change this, then Proton VPN can help. Proton VPN has servers all over the world, so you can connect to any part of the world to circumvent these restrictions, watch what you want, and when you use a VPN, your ISP can't see what you're doing. So anyone trying to look in can't see what you're up to. If you're interested, the link in the description will provide you a 64% off deal, which is a special deal provided to the entire Totally Not KO community. Thank you again to Proton for sponsoring today's video. Yeah, so funny thing, I got called a woman today. So it's midnight and I can't sleep, so I'm going to talk to you about Linux. I ran a poll and over 1,000 people responded. I asked what you wanted me to talk about. I gave a couple of options and you guys wanted to hear what my take is on Linux. And the reason why it particularly interests so many people is because I am one of the very, very few in the entire tech space who actually prefers Windows and actually isn't the biggest fan of Linux. Because you hear so many people in the tech space talk about, oh, hey, you know, you should use Linux, by the way. You should switch to Linux. Linux is the best thing ever. Fuck Windows. And while I do agree, fuck Microsoft, you know, I actually think that Windows fundamentally as a system, I mean, me personally, I just prefer it. So anyways, I'm going to talk about I'm going to go in depth on my take on Linux. I'm going to go in depth on my opinions on Linux and everything that I believe is wrong with it. And then I'm going to showcase actually running Linux Mint and showcasing you some of the problems that I experienced when I tried out Linux. And then I am going to talk about finally my workflow a little bit and talk about why it works better on Windows, and I'll showcase it. So just for a little background, I'm not like a Linux expert. I wanted to get into Linux. I got told to use Linux Mint, as most people do. And so I tried out Linux Mint. I ran Linux Mint for about a year on my main PC and then 2 years on my laptop. And then eventually I moved back to Windows. Now, Windows, I'll just go ahead and get started with why, and all of my arguments are going to be focused on less tech-savvy users, like the average everyday user, maybe just a teenager who just wants to do some gaming, or the kind of person who opens up their web browser, you know, maybe does some like little bits of work, or hell, maybe they'll even watch some YouTube and then get off, or like pay the bills and get off, whatever, right? These people aren't doing any crazy programming or any crazy shit like that. Because I'll tell you outright, for lower level programming and for a lot of software development, Linux actually is superior to Windows. And that's because a lot of the tools at your disposal, a lot of the things just work on Linux in that field. Which is not the case for, you know, standard user software. Like actually even for what I do kind of more in cybersecurity, digital forensics and everything, you're going to want to use Linux for that because Linux is just objectively better for that kind of work. And there's no denying that. But I will say though, when it comes to trying to run any Adobe products, when it comes to trying to run any modern like FPS games, when it comes to trying to run any modern certain video games that may have anti-cheats or anything like that, Linux typically tends to fail there. And you see, that's not like a minor problem, that's a major problem. It's because if it were some like obscure kind of more minor software that nobody ever uses, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But a ton of people use Adobe products. A ton of people use a bunch of different software that doesn't work on Linux. Like even FL Studio doesn't work on Linux. You can go down the road of virtual machines and all that, but of course no less tech-savvy user is going to know how to do that. You can dual boot, but that's just inefficient and tedious, and just it's very jarring to have to reboot your computer, press the F keys to get to your boot menu and then boot into the like that's just tedious. And you got to think, for a less tech savvy user, I mean, they just want to have their shit work on their system. And with Linux, it's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Oh, Microsoft Word and Publisher and all that shit, just use LibreOffice. Oh, Adobe products, just use whatever else other thing there is. And the problem with that is that these open source alternatives objectively are different. And, you know, especially when it comes to certain work and everything, you have to, I mean, these are industry standards, and you have to use this certain software in a lot of work in a lot of scenarios. And also because the software is different. And so you have to kind of relearn everything. You have to get adapted to the flaws and problems with that software. And which, by the way, the open source alternatives for all that shit has many, many problems. But I'm not even gonna go down that road. We'll just say, imagine if it's perfect, it's different. You have to integrate your workflow into that. You're gonna have to entirely change up your workflow. That's a tall order for someone who's already used to what they're used to. Because if there's one thing I know, it's that trying to switch someone off of something they're already used to is way more difficult than just trying to, than when they're starting fresh and they're picking an option. And this is actually the problem with Linux, is why it doesn't get adopted so much too, is because when you buy a computer, it comes with Windows on it, and it's, you just have your system right there, and everyone knows Windows, everyone is familiar with Windows, everyone grew up on Windows except maybe a few minority who's going to comment and be like, oh, actually I did. You know, but anyways, a majority of people grew up on Windows, and so people are used to it. And trying to get them used to Linux is, I mean, I know there's Linux Mint and stuff like that, which is supposed to be a lot more Windows-like, where it's supposed to be a lot more user-friendly for a Windows adjusted user. But, you know, it's still, there's flaws there. Now, actually, if you do have some really old hunk of junk hardware that can't even support Windows anymore or something like that, it's struggling, it barely runs or anything, and it doesn't have much resources on it or anything like that, then you actually can use Linux for that system, because Linux is very lightweight. That's a pro of Linux. But you see, the problem with Linux is long-term stability, because when it comes to Windows, when it comes to Mac OS, it's the company controls it top down completely, every component. They do internal testing of all these components. All these components are designed to work together. Now, Windows has even recently pushed updates that really fuck people's shit up. And that just happens. That they're not bulletproof against that. But the chances of an update really fucking you over is way lower on Windows or Mac OS or anything like that. Because it has happened to me before. If you go look on my Twitter and you find the post that I made on Christmas, I think it was of last year, you will literally find that on Christmas I was having to be in the command line, my computer booted up and it was a black screen and just white text. And I had to be sitting there running a bunch of commands and stuff to repair my system because an update fucking broke it on Christmas. So, I mean, obviously, it sucks when shit like that happens. And a lot of people, when they get to that point, they're going to be like, what the fuck? Now, there is, like, time shift and stuff like that, ways to recover whenever something fucks up, like from an update or whatever. But these tools actually, first off, you have to actually go and explicitly turn them on and configure them, which already is a tall order for a less tech savvy user. And then they don't even work depending on what breaks, because if something it depends on breaks or something like that, then it obviously just won't work. And then you have to also know how to restore it back up. And all of this, just, you know, think about a less tech savvy user there, that's not going to be great. And let's talk about the biggest problem with trying to get a less tech savvy user to try to switch to Linux from Windows. They need to buy a USB drive. I don't really see less tech savvy users ever really have like USB drives laying around. So you need a USB drive of 8 to 16 gigs, about, for most Linux distros. You need to download an ISO file from the website, from the Linux distribution's website. This is after already researching and having to do your homework to find a distro in the first place, and then you read a lot of conflicting shit about, oh, what's the best beginner-friendly, whatever the fuck, and you have to eventually find a distro that you want. then you have to go to the website, then you have to download the ISO, then you have to download a tool like Rufus or something similar, and then you have to flash the ISO to the USB drive. You have to plug it in your computer and flash it, and then you have to reboot your system. You have to press those F keys, delete, whatever the hell, you boot into Linux, and then, or you don't boot into Linux just yet, because actually there's a thing on your system called secure boot. And for a lot of Linux distros, they actually are incompatible with secure boot, unless if, as a very recent or something, listen, my knowledge of Linux dates back to like 2024. So like, unless if something drastically changed in a single year, you know, I got, you know, but maybe I'm wrong, but I will just clarify that. Now, when it comes to Linux, though, you have to go into your BIOS settings. You have to disable secure boot, which is a security component of your system. So you're already disabling a security mechanism of your computer to keep you safe. Then you have to boot into the, then you have to restart your computer again. You have to press those F keys to get to the boot menu. Then you have to select it, and then and only then you get into the Linux installation. Now, and a lot of people, I made a video touching on Windows versus Linux and stuff, and I said they're both great. And when I made that video, I talked about how installing Linux is hard, and people were like, oh, look at this idiot, maybe in like 2008. and they thought I was talking about after you're booted into the CD. I wasn't talking about that, you fucking dunce. I was talking about actually the process of even making the bootable drive in the first place. And that whole process for a less tech savvy user, yeah, good luck with that. Now, there are some systems out there that have Linux pre-installed. System 76 is a brand that I know has Linux pre-installed on their computers. But that's niche. Nobody's fucking buying from System 76 unless if they're so in that niche, you know, tech community or whatever that buys those kinds of systems. Most people, average tech savvy, less tech savvy users, are going to be going to Best Buy and just grabbing a fucking HP or God forbid, or buy a Dell or buy an Asus or whatever the case may be. They go down to Micro Center and, you know, nobody's buying System 76. Nobody's, and all of these brands have deals with Microsoft to have it be the de facto install. And I mean, some people may say, well, that's unfair. You know, they just have an unfair advantage because they're on there for. Well, I mean, average tech savvy users don't give a shit if what's fair and unfair. They just get a system. From all the less tech savvy users I've talked to, which is many. And the people who are outside of the computer screen, when you go outside and touch grass and talk to like human beings who have day-to-day jobs and aren't really on their computers that much, these people, which is most people entirely, they just want a system that they can turn on, do the thing, click the funny button, and then it does the thing they want, and then get off. You know, Linux is just not that kind of experience. It is so much homework. It is so much initial setup. It is so much complicated bullshit just for them to even get it booted. And then after they get through the install, then they're going to deal with stability problems long term. They're going to be dealing with updates that can fuck their shit up. They're going to be dealing with all these different complications, and whenever you have a Linux problem, when you have a problem on your system, you're going to be relying on threads from like 8 years ago. Because the thing about these centralized systems too, like Windows and Mac OS, is when you have a problem and you need to navigate the settings or something to get somewhere to change a setting, it's consistent on every single system. If you navigate to system settings, you navigate to apps, you navigate to default apps, then you click, you know, that whatever, it's all the exact same path, same road on every single system to get to one setting, and it's always there and it's always changeable. Now, that's not the same with Linux because, you know, many different Linux distros use different desktop environments. They use completely different file managers, completely different settings apps, completely different everything else. So, I mean, in the documentation, fucking sucks. I don't care what any of you guys say. The documentation for Linux is dog water, especially for a less tech savvy user. I mean, I don't want to hear none of that. Just read the documentation. Bullshit. No, it sucks. And you have to rely on these old ass threads, or you have to rely on Chat GPT. AI has been a great thing for Linux. For less tech savvy users having a problem, they can find it out easier due to AI, and that's a good thing. but it's still not perfect because AI also just fucking hallucinates and just blatantly gets shit wrong. I had a problem on Linux and I was having ChatGPT help me, and I swear to God, it led me down a 45-minute rabbit hole and some stupid bullshit, and my problem didn't even end up getting solved anyways. And a lot of people talk about Linux compatibility with older hardware, and this is tied to what I just said, what I was trying to fix. I had a screen tearing problem on Linux, and it's because I'm using older Intel UHD 4600 graphics. Yeah, geez, from 2013, integrated Intel graphics from 2013. I know it's Jesus Christ, but this hunk of junk runs that shit. It's from 2013. And a lot of people say Linux support for older hardware is fantastic. And what they're not telling you is it's only fantastic for certain older hardware. Because if it's like older Intel graphics or some shit like that, or even older NVIDIA, you're going to be having a hard time trying to get that shit running. Actually, just NVIDIA in general. NVIDIA performs like dog ass on Linux, and the driver support for NVIDIA, graphics cards on Linux sucks. And, these Linux users, when you complain about it and you're like, what can I do about it? They're going to be like, oh, it's NVIDIA's fault. Oh, and they're going to say, your fault for buying an NVIDIA card. Just get AMD, like they either push the blame on you or they push the blame on NVIDIA when the end user doesn't give a shit. The average non-tech savvy user doesn't give a fuck whose fault it is. They just try a system, realize that their shit doesn't work as good, and then they're going to move back to Windows. That no one gives a fuck whose fault it is about, that sort of thing. But that leads me kind of into my point with Microsoft, is that they even work directly with NVIDIA, Intel, and these other brands to provide good driver support and to get like stable, solid drivers that are very good and work well on the system. That's just an advantage that Windows has. Like, when I tried Linux, I had that screen tearing problem. I'm using Windows 11 on a 2013 PC. This PC is from 2013, and yet my system runs very smooth, no screen tearing, and it performs well, very well, and in fact. And you wouldn't even be able to tell this computer was from 2013. It's an Optiplex 9020. It's a refurbished one that I got for like $300, and this computer runs fantastically on Windows, but then whenever I boot into Linux, it kind of struggles. And that the graphic, the weird, oh yeah, that reminds me, while we're on the topic of graphics, so I am using a monitor, a 1920 by 1080 monitor, and then a 1920 by 1080 TV right now. But this TV used to be a different TV. I used to have a different TV, actually that one over there, and this one is 1366 by 768 or some shit like that. Anyways, the multi-monitor support for Linux is so fucking shitty, especially when there are two different sized monitors. It hates that shit. It fucking despises that shit. I cannot tell you how much of an annoyance that was trying to get that shit to even work. And now that I'm on the two consistently sized screens, I was on these two consistently sized screens for a little while on Linux. It handled it better, but it still handled it like shit. And let's actually even talk about the desktop environments on Linux. I tried GNOME, which was, and then I tried Cinnamon, which Cinnamon's my favorite, really, and because it's just the most stable. It looks kind of older school. It has that old school look on it, but I mean, it was fine. It was my favorite, just because when it comes to my desktop environment, I value stability more than anything. And then there was KDE Plasma, which looked the best, but was so fucking buggy and was so janky. it was actually so annoying trying to use it, because it felt so unstable. And that's obviously a fundamental problem with these popular desktop environments that so many Linux distros rely on, which, by the way, distros are like the flavors of Linux, because instead of it just being Windows and just being Mac, there's thousands of different Linux OSs, Linux distributions out there that you have to pick from, and that's what I was talking about, having to do your homework, having to do your research before you even get involved in the first place. And another, it really, the fact that it's basically Linux is just a ton of different open source things all over the place, and kind of like stitching them and combining them together, and they're all trying to update independently and being maintained and operated independently. This is a open source decentralized manner, but that does mean that one thing can update and easily break some other shit, and this happened. I mean, this does happen. It was terrible. I remember one time, I can't remember exactly what I particularly did. I think I actually switched from Cinnamon to KDE. I uninstalled Cinnamon and then I installed KDE. And for some reason, I don't know if it even actually had to do with that or if it was just a problem with my drivers or something. But every time my system updated, the text on everything broke. And like, anytime I tried to click anything or start anything or whatever, it would just have like a broken error message window pop up or some shit, and then I had to restart my computer and then it would be fixed. I don't even know what kind of magic fuckery happened there, but it really drives me to my point that Linux is very unstable and is just so fragile. It feels like, and that's a fundamental problem when it comes to trying to get an average less tech savvy user to try to stick to this system. Windows objectively is more stable. Now, we can even talk about just, look, my whole point is that for a less tech savvy user, this shit's just going to be a struggle. It really is. And I've seen so many of the arguments for Linux, and I've seen so many of the counter arguments to everything I just said, but none of them really, they either just dodge it or they just shift blame, or they're like, oh, just don't do that, do this instead. Like when it's like, I wanted to do this with my system, and then they're like, no, that way sucks, do it this way. And it's like, dude, when it comes to general OS stability, when it comes to software availability, when it comes to ease of use, out of the box experience, Windows is just objectively better for that. Now, for someone who really fucking hates microshart and doesn't want to deal with the microshat bullshit, and you want to try something new, what you can do, and I do understand that even the Windows 11, the Windows 10 cutoff is rearing its head. It's almost October, and Windows 10 is going to be out of support. So when you do switch to Windows 11 or whatever you end up doing, you can use a debloater. And you have to be careful about debloaters though, because this can seriously sacrifice stability and even security. I've seen some debloaters designed by some absolutely stupid developers. I'll just say that they're downright stupid, and they literally recommend that you disable integral core security features of your system for more performance. Like they tell you to either they get rid of Windows Defender, or they tell you to disable core isolation, which is integral to system security. That's a very important core feature of the security system. And that's just but if you, as long as you are smart with your choice of picking a debloater and you pick one that's best for you, then go for it. Now I know I'm biased, okay, because I made it, but if you want to, when the time rolls around and you're ready to switch to Windows 11, you can try Talon, which is a debloater that me and my team Raven made. And you can debloat Windows in 2 clicks, because the whole idea is that you can completely debloat Windows without even having to be like tech savvy or anything. And you don't have to do a bunch of bullshit, run a bunch of commands or do PowerShell or check a bunch of boxes or anything like pretty much every debloater you see out there. Instead, what you do is you download an exe and then you just click it. You click your browser you want, you just click the button and then it goes. And there's even Talon Lite now. So regular Talon is designed for fresh, brand new installations of Windows 11 Home or Professional only. But then if you're on a different version of Windows 11, or you're still on Windows 10 or whatever else, you can still get a less extreme but still good debloated experience and an integral part of this is getting rid of all of Microsoft's spying, getting rid of the AI bullshit that they're trying to put in the system and everything like that. I would recommend having a debloated version of Windows over Linux, because for less tech savvy users specifically, because they're just going to have a better time. It's just going to be easier, because frankly, Linux is just not there yet for that audience. For that audience, Linux just ain't ready yet. And that's just what I believe. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who bring out the pitchforks and everything about that, but that's just what I think. But I am a strong believer that I think that you should not just take one person's word for it. The only way to get the true best answer for you is to try it. You don't know if you will hate it until you try it. So if you really are unsure whether you want to go with Windows or Linux, if you don't have the time to sit there and experiment with it or whatever, and you have a life to live, fair enough. You're not a nerd terminally online, fair enough. Just stick with Windows, get a debloated experience, you'll be happy with it. If you do want to play around with it to really make a solid choice, though, I highly recommend you do try Linux and just see if it works for you. Because even though there are hurdles with Linux, there's hurdles with Windows too. Both systems suck in their own ways, and then both systems are fantastic in their own ways. And so many people are you must pick one side or the other with this sort of thing. While I generally prefer Windows more, and I believe that Linux just isn't there yet, I'm pretty in the middle about it. There's pros and cons to every single situation. One size does not fit all. Linux doesn't fit some use cases. Linux doesn't fit some people's taste, and then it does for others. Windows doesn't fit the taste. Windows fits for others. It's the same case. You're never going to have a single solution that fits everyone, and that's why I believe it's good to have options. Because even companies' enterprise solutions on Linux is a laughable joke. Trying to set up a whole enterprise computer system, computer network based on Linux there's a lot missing. There's a lot of shit that you can get for Windows and stuff like that you just can't get. And Linux, that's Windows just for that alone is in that kind of use case is very important. I think that having that more proprietary, safer, more stable option with the enterprise availability options and stuff I think that's good. My whole I'm rambling. My whole point is that I really hate the idea of there only being one option, which is why I actually do support Linux. The idea of Linux being an option, I think that's fantastic. But I also, you just when it comes to be realistic about the options. I can't even remember if I already mentioned this, but it's midnight. And my Linux virtual machine fucking combusted. So instead of trying to remake it, I'm just going to showcase what I was going to tell you and show you about on Linux Mint with pictures, because I am too lazy to fucking remake my virtual machine. So I do have the first picture pulled up here. And this is the software manager, which is in most versions of Linux that you'll get. This is particularly Linux Mint. I know it is an older picture though, I believe. And as you can see there, you can, instead of having to go to each website, download the exe file, run the installers and all of that, it's like an app store. You open it up, you can just type in what you want and click install, and then you have the app now. And it's that easy. That is theoretic. In theory, that is super easy and so just an enjoyable, seamless experience, which really makes computing so much easier. Just to get Minecraft, and you can get your WhatsApp and Spotify and all of that just by typing it in, clicking it, and then install. There you go. It's really, in theory, it's a really good idea. In reality, though, and again, my experience is with Linux Mint particularly, but I do know that other Linux distros suffer this problem. Even just Spotify, for example. If you do search up Spotify, you get like 4 different results that all say Spotify, and that all can kind of look like the official Spotify, and you don't know which fucking one to pick. Now, And for example, I remember this vividly, and I mean, again, my virtual machine's not here, but if anyone with Linux, I implore you to try this. If you search up in the software manager Spotify, there's one with like the circle Spotify icon, then there's one like this with the square Spotify icon, then there's one that's even Spotify -QT, and there's these other ones, all these different options. You don't know which one to pick. It's confusing for a less tech savvy user. You look at it and you're like, whoa, what the hell? You know, which one am I supposed to pick? And, you know, there's another problem too, which is flat packs, because there's a difference between the regular options and then the flat pack options, the flat hub, flat pack options in the software manager, because the flat pack versions are, as far as I'm aware, more secure, because they actually run in like a sandboxed environment and everything. I believe, if I, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I've been in the Linux scene, but flat packs are pretty cool technology. And but anyways, certain features of different software break and just don't work if it's the flat pack version. And then also, some of those listings are community maintained repositories. Instead of it being like officially maintained by Spotify, it could just be some dude keeping it up to date, which there's a major problem with that. And it's the security risk, because then you're not going to be getting updates necessarily and when they come out, because you have to wait for this guy who maintains the package to push the update, which is terrifying, because if it's an abandoned, you know, if it's abandoned or anything like that, you know, it can take an extra week or two just to get that update. What if it's a really crucial update or something, you know? And also, I vividly remember whenever I downloaded Discord off of this, it gave me the flat pack version and I couldn't share my screen. And then after I finally got the regular version, I could share my screen again, but then there was a problem. You couldn't even share, you can't share stream audio on Discord when you're on Linux. I don't know if that's fixed now, but that was a big problem for a while. But anyways, the fact that I couldn't even screen share in the first place, and there's other problems like this, especially with Spotify and everything else, it's the fact that core features of the software doesn't work when you're on Linux, or sorry, when you use the Flatpak version versus the regular version. And then the fact that some of these are just community maintained and not even official and everything else is there. There's a very blatant problem there as far as, you know, safety and even ease of use goes. That's just a pain in the ass more than it is helping. Okay, fun part. Let's talk about my workflow, and let's talk about specifically what the kind of tools I'm using and why what I do is just objectively easier on Windows. Now, what I do is malware analysis. Sometimes when I'm bored, I like to do a little digital forensics, sometimes inspect some software, dig into it a bit, and kind of learn how it works, or, you know, investigate the properties of it and everything like that. Hold on, my camera's fucking dying. Let me fix that shit. Autofocus, fantastic. So that's what you get for buying a Logitech, man. But anyways, so the kind of shit that I do requires what's called virtual machines, and it's even for stuff like testing software, or, you know, software development, everything. If I need a fresh environment to test everything on, virtual machines are fantastic for this. These are like digital fake computers inside of your computer. And there's type 1 hypervisors, which means you can run a system, a fake, fully virtualized system alongside your real system. And then a type 2 hypervisor is there's a system running inside your Windows system. I know it can be a bit confusing. If you're not more tech savvy, you know, my bad. Maybe I can explain it better someday, really dive deep into virtual machines if you want me to. Let me know if you do. But basically, the kind of work that I do, I need type 1 hypervisors, because it gives me bare metal performance and is just superior for the kind of work that I'm doing, because even malware and different detections and stuff can detect you're on a virtual machine much easier when you're on a type 2. And again, the bare metal performance and everything is very hard to beat. So trying to do that on Linux is way more complicated than trying to do it on Windows. Why? Because Windows has a built-in thing called Hyper-V. And Hyper-V is actually a really fantastic technology. It is such an underrated thing. And it's probably the greatest thing Microsoft has ever created. I know I'm glazing it hard right now, but that's because I fucking love Hyper-V. And I really don't feel like I'm exaggerating either. Hyper-V is crazy good. It is super easy to spin up and manage and run different virtual type 1 virtual machines, type 1 hypervisors, virtual machines. And with Linux, you can do that. It's just way more difficult, though. You have to use something called KVM, QEMU, KVM, whatever. And that is a lot more tricky to get set up. I feel like it's more complex, more difficult to try to get that running. I feel like Hyper-V is just a lot easier, because Hyper-V is actually even built into Windows, and I'll showcase that now if you want to follow along and, you know, get Hyper-V running on your system, because there's a cool thing too called the Windows Sandbox, but we'll get to that. Now, I'm on my system, and yes, I do have VS Codium open, but that's because I was, listen, I know I'm cheating on my boy Construct, okay? Listen, you gotta understand. You gotta understand that what I was doing, man. Please, please. If you want to know the truth, is actually because the Markdown preview, like VS Codium has a Markdown preview. Anyways, that's besides the point entirely. So if you go turn Windows features on or off. Now you need to have Windows Pro or above. If you have Windows Home, you can't do this. You need to upgrade to Pro. But you open up the control panel. Yes, give it my password here. Go here, you're going to need to enable Hyper-V, check Hyper-V. You go here, Windows Hypervisor Platform, Windows Virtual Machine Platform, toggle those on, then Windows Sandbox right here. Toggle those on as well. Once you finally have that, you restart your computer, and then you get access to Hyper-V. You just search Hyper-V, and it's right there. And when you open it up, you get a really nice, clean control panel, and I'll actually go ahead and showcase it here. So you go ahead and, you know, again, feed it my password. And then once you're here, you can see my different Windows testing environments. And then there's even Quick Create, where you click this. Okay. Had a stroke there for a second. And then you click local installation source. You can check if this will run Windows or not. Change installation source. You select whatever the ISO file is. You click create, and boom, you just have a virtual machine, a type 1 hypervisor virtual machine right there. And then you can even go into settings, and you can allocate, you can enable TPM for Windows 11, of course. And then memory, you can set the memory to 16 gigs. You can pass it however many processors you want, boot that bad boy up, and then you got a whole testing environment right here. You click revert, and then that's another great thing about Hyper-V, is all I have to do is right click, and then you can make a checkpoint, and then you can always just revert back the state of the virtual machine. I know this is actually a thing on VirtualBox 2, I think, but theirs is way worse. So look, watch. I click that, I click this. And I'm on a computer from 2013, by the way. I know I have 32 gigs of RAM, but that's DDR3. and look, you do this, you spin that up, give it a quick second, you click sign in right here. And I have a whole virtual Windows system right here ready to go. And as you can see, I used this to test Talon on different builds of Talon. And if I actually ran this and went through the whole installation process, and, you know, I could run malware inside of this, actually. I could go as far as to run some really crazy, nasty, nefarious shit. I could run ransomware, all that shit in here. And then when, you know, I'm done, I can just revert back. I can turn it off, and then checkpoint, revert, and give it a moment, and then it'll revert back to the original state, and then it'll go right back there. For more deeper malware analysis and everything, you need to have a full-on virtual machine like that. But if you do have just a file or a suspicious link or something like that that you're not too sure, and you want to test it out in a safe environment, just make sure, just in case if anything bad happens, you want to test it somewhere where it can't escape and get to your real stuff, your real files, your real data. All you have to do is type in Windows Sandbox, and I have it pinned right here. Watch. You click a button on your taskbar as if you're launching any regular app, right? So like, just like launching your web browser, even your text editor, all you do is click on your taskbar and boom, you have it, right? All I had to do was click on my taskbar, and then you have to wait just like 30 seconds. Boom. And now I have a whole virtual Windows setup, my own little playground, my own sandbox, if you will, that I can just completely detonate malware in here, do whatever. And then when I'm done, you click the X, it'll say, warning, are you sure? Once sandbox is closed, all the contents will be discarded and permanently lost. Whatever happens in this virtual machine when you're done and you close that out and exit it, annihilated, gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And then you restart Windows Sandbox and it's completely fresh again. It is fantastic. You get disposable type 1 hypervisor virtual machines just at a click of a button. It's so crazy. Now, if you are going to be detonating malware, ransomware, anything like that, malware can actually escape virtual machines through the clipboard redirection and through audio input and video input. So I would highly recommend you turn those off after you put in whatever file. But let's say hypothetically, if I actually went here and I open the location, I grab Scratchpad, if I copy this file and then I can paste it inside the virtual machine, because I don't know if this file is safe or not, right? You can paste it inside of here, and then I can turn off clipboard redirection just to make sure, you know, that you don't want that on if you're not using it. As soon as you're done using it, turn it off. But then I can go ahead and detonate this program, run this program, see if it's actually safe or not, just see what it does. Or I can click that shady link or whatever else, and then boom, you can actually, and even if you know it's not malicious or whatever, but you just want, you don't want to commit to installing a piece of software yet, you want to play around with it first, get like kind of a trial, get a feel for that software before you really throw it on your main machine. Then you can even install it in the sandbox and test it out in the sandbox first, see if you like it, and then if you're ready to commit, install it on your real system. And then watch, you completely destroy it, gone. It's fantastic how easy it is to, and Hyper-V is their fucking bread and butter. Let me tell you, they have some corporate enterprise clients that rely on Hyper-V. Xbox, whenever you play a game on Xbox, you know how you can actually save the state of a game and come back to it later? It's because Xbox, the underlying technology, is actually Hyper-V. Every game you play, what it does is it actually spins up a container and it actually runs Hyper-V, runs through Hyper-V, and you play your game. And then obviously the revert back, save state, all that shit that's Hyper-V. It's really amazing. But this is the kind of technology that they're selling to data centers, that crucial data centers are relying on Hyper-V. And really high stakes, high security environments rely on Hyper-V. So this is going to be the one product that Windows really gives a shit, that Microsoft really gives a shit about security for. But no, they actually really take security extremely seriously with Hyper-V. And Hyper-V is extremely secure and is extremely, really good. You get this really high-end, really quality piece of amazing technology that you can just fuck around with as long as you have Windows Pro or above. And I really don't know why Windows Sandbox isn't a more marketed, well-known even feature that's like built into every Windows system on by default or anything like that, because it's an amazing tool. And the fact that I can just click a button on my taskbar and then get that is fantastic. And especially for a less tech savvy user, what I just did to get Windows Sandbox is very doable. All you have to do is check some boxes, hit restart, and then type it in. You can pin it to your taskbar, and then there you go. Now, that's really awesome. And Linux, it's not that easy. It's not a click of a button. It's not type in some shit, check some boxes, hit restart, then you're done. It's you have to install a bunch of shit with sudo apt install. Then you're gonna have to run some probably command line arguments. You're gonna have to use these more complicated interfaces to set all this shit up yourself, when Windows, in this case, you just click the fucking button. So I'm sure, as you can see, it just makes my life way easier. And frankly, I've just, even the dashboard that Hyper-V provides and everything like that, I just prefer it better. And Hyper-V even performs better on my hardware, at least, and everything. I've just had a way smoother, way easier, just so much easier time with Windows in this regard when it comes to virtual machines. That's the summary of this entire segment of the video. And it's really boils down to, I mean, virtual machines are complicated. No one can deny that. Virtual machines are complex. But this really makes it so simple to use them, to get that shit going. And that's like, that alone is already just... Now let's move on. I've already beat this dead horse enough. Let's talk about another reason why, when it comes to my workflow and everything, why I prefer Windows. And it's because I grew up on Windows. I know Windows. I know the system in and out, because when I was a kid, I had a bunch of free time and I just played around with the system. I learned a little bit of batch scripting, which really gets you familiar with the different commands and stuff for command prompt and everything. So I understand Windows fundamentally, and like as a system, and that really makes it a lot just easier to use. I'm very familiar with the commands, how to operate everything. I know where everything is on Windows. I know where all the settings are. I know all the tricks and everything like that. I know the system inside and out. And then Linux is such a different beast when it comes to trying to learn it, I feel like, because, you know, you can sit down and learn Bash and learn all that, get familiar with the different core commands of Linux. And I'm familiar with the basic core commands of Linux too, because, you know, in fucking, cybersecurity class, half of that damn class was like, hey, let's just learn Linux. God. But anyways, such a waste of money. Public education system is fantastic, by the way. Okay, I'm rambling. I'm getting off track. Linux, trying to learn the system inside and out and everything, though, I mean, it's also changing all the time. It varies depending on system to system, and there's so much about it that's just like Linux. Trying to learn Linux, and again, it's what I talked about. It's frankly, it's what I already know, and now I'm trying to switch to something new when I'm used to the shit I already know. If I don't have all the free time in the world to just sit there and really just sit down and deal with issues and learn all this, I want a system that I am familiar with and that I know just works and all that, and that I can just get my shit done so that I can be done with it. I don't want to sit there and deal with all of those problems and deal with everything and really sit there and tinker and all that, which Linux requires me to do, and I just don't want to. I want a solution that just works. And Hyper-V for virtual machines is that. Windows in general is just that, as far as everything I try to do. And most people are on Windows. Like, that's just subjective. There's no argument about that. And especially less tech-savvy users. And that there's no denying that. Most less tech-savvy users don't even know what the fuck Linux is. Like, I know you hear so much about Linux on the computer space, but when you actually go in the outside world, you start talking about Linux, they don't know what the fuck that is. They never heard about it a day in their life. But anyways, these people are on Windows, and the kind of work that I do when it comes to my software development, making content and everything else like that, these people are on Windows. And I have to cater to those people. If those are my target audience, then I need to hit where the target audience is. I can't be like, hey, target audience, hey, I want to be there for you guys. That's why I'm going to tell you to uproot your entire shit, spend a ton of time learning an entire new system, install this whole new system, go through that entire headache of a process, and get used to this entire new system that's unstable and doesn't even work for a lot of your use cases. No. For all the software that Raven does right now, the reason why we even only do have software available for Windows at the moment is because it's just me doing the software development, and frankly, having to test and write code for multiple different systems and everything is just a task that I'm not ready. I just don't want to bear. So whenever Raven's team expands and there's more people dealing with software development, then obviously we'll support Linux as well. But our target audience is less tech-savvy users too, so it just makes sense to just focus on Windows, like hands down. And for when I do want to use Linux, whenever I want to use something that's Linux only or something, for example, right? Because there are some tools that I even actually use for the kind of work that I do that are Linux only. And I really want to use them. How do I go about doing that? Well, there's this thing called Windows Subsystem for Linux. And it's the exact same way you turn on Hyper-V. You just have to go to turn Windows features on or off or whatever, and you scroll down and there's a selection Windows Subsystem for Linux. Check that. Restart your system. Now what you can do is you can actually install a subsystem of, you can run Linux in Windows. And then I'll actually showcase this right now. So if I actually type, I don't even need to type anything. I have it pinned to my taskbar right here. You open this up, you get your terminal, boom, I'm on Linux. Now, if I do that, NeoFetch isn't a thing anymore, is it? Yeah, is it screen fetch? Jesus Christ, what's the new thing? Anyways, I'm on Linux. I was gonna do the fancy thing that they do, but NeoFetch doesn't exist anymore. God rest its soul. And I can't remember what the name of the alternative version is, but I literally get Linux inside of Windows here, and I can do all the Linux shit that I want to do. So I can do sudo apt install cowsay, and I can type in that command, I can install it, and then I can do cowsay plus Linux. That was so stupid. But yeah, you can literally, when it comes to, Linux runs in Windows. So for the few things that I want to do that is Linux, I'm getting all the benefits of Windows, and then I'm getting all the benefits of Linux. For my workflow, this is a superior. it just is, because I could do Linux and then just run all my Windows shit in a virtual machine, but that just is not. Like I actually tried that for a while, and it just didn't, it wasn't as smooth. It just didn't work for me. And Linux objectively has just been a worse off experience for my kind of day-to-day workflow. The software development that I do, the running virtual machines that I do, all of that has just been an easier time on Windows. I have been ranting for a long time here, and I think most of my points have been made. But just in case, I am going to quickly, I wrote down a few bullet points when I was coming up with everything I was going to talk about, and I'm just going to hit you with these bullet points really fast as a quick TLDR summary of my choices, of my everything that I said. Stability shouldn't depend on picking the right version of Linux, and that's currently the case. It really depends on you really have to do your homework and pick the right one. Otherwise, you risk stability or many other problems. Choice is fun for ice cream, but not your operating system. It is not a fun time having to sit there, research, and pick, your OS and all that shit. You want one that just works, right? It boots is not the same as everything works, and having to convince people to switch and change up their entire workflows and everything else is just a pain in the fucking ass. I'll just say it. Safer on paper doesn't mean safer in practice, and this is another problem as well. Objectively, there's a lot unsafe and unstable about Linux, where technically on paper Linux may seem safer, but in reality Windows, I've seen people go, but Windows has had way more CVEs or way more whatever the hell. I'm not even going to argue that, because frankly that's just such a stupid fucking take. But coming from the 4% market share system, and then the giant, what is it, 80-90%, that's besides the point. Alternatives don't pay the bills when your job needs the real software. Free to install but costly to live with is what I wrote, and that really just summarizes my point with long-term having to deal with Linux. If Linux were truly ready, we wouldn't be having this debate. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it's because of marketing, it's because of, all this shit. And partly I agree with the fact that it's because Windows just comes pre-installed with systems already. But if Linux were truly ready in this amazing godsend system, I feel it would be more widespread. Whether you disagree with that or not, that's what I believe. I believe that if Linux were truly this amazing godsend, amazing, just glorious system that everyone loves immediately and it fits everyone perfectly, if it were truly as amazing as you say it was, it would be more popular. And it's just not. Like, the market share wise and everything like that, it just isn't. And I don't think that the market share thing is purely to blame because of Windows or Mac OS or anything like that. I feel like we have to get to a certain point where we stop pointing the finger at everybody else but ourselves and realize that it's we instead of focusing on, oh boo hoo, oh someone call the fucking ambulance, you know, he did this, they did that, whatever the hell. How about instead we focus on what can we do to make ourselves better? And that is such a crazy hot take for Linux for some reason, and I don't understand it. But you know, that generally speaks to why I don't fit in the Linux community, I suppose. But that's about it. If you know, you liked it, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. That's all I have to say on that.